Let's call to order this meeting of the City of Bloomington Plan Commission for October 18th, 2021. Let's begin by calling the roll, please.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Burrell?
Here.
Kate?
Here.
Pereira?
Here.
Kinsey?
Here.
Cockrum?
Here.
Sandberg?
Here.
Seabour?
Here.
St. John?
Here.
And Whistler.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we do have a quorum. So we will proceed with our agenda. We have two petitions continued to the next meeting and two petitions that we will hear tonight. Before we get to that, we do have some minutes to be approved. We have minutes from the September 13th meeting. Are there any corrections or additions or questions about those minutes? All right, do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? All right, all in favor of approving the September 13th, 2021 meeting minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. We'll move on now to reports, resolutions, and communications. Do we have any reports, resolutions, or communications from staff this evening?
We have one, Jackie Scanlon, Development Services Manager. We had intended to appoint a new plat committee member tonight, but we will wait until next month. There is an alternate available for that position from City of Bloomington Utilities that will serve if need be, but they would prefer to wait to fill the full position until they have a new staff member. So we're going to wait on that, and then Phil Peden will serve in his position as the alternate if we need someone before they have someone hired. So that will, you will see that on the agenda, I'm assuming again next month. And that's the only update I have.
All right, great. Any reports, resolutions, or communications from commissioners tonight? All right, seeing none, we will move on to petitions. There are two petitions that are going to be continued to the November 15th meeting. Those are DP 20-21. This is a primary plat approval for 33 single-family lots at 3111 South Walnut Street, Pike. Bledsoe Riggert Cooper James is the petitioner. The other that is being continued is PUD DP 24-21, petitioner Robert B. Shaw, and this is a final plan and preliminary plat amendment for property in the 3500 block of North Hackberry Street. So two petitions that we will hear tonight, SP 2721, which we will hear first, and then when we conclude that, we will hear DP 29-21, which is a subdivision at 2306 and 2310 West 3rd Street. So we'll start with 2721, and I believe we have Eric Grulich here to present the case.
Thank you, Brad. Just give me just a second. Thank you. So as mentioned, this is a request from Michael Cordor for property at 335 West 8th Street. This is the site just north of the Johnson Creamery building, just southwest of the Showers Plaza, here within the mixed-use downtown zoning district, within the downtown core overlay. So the petitioner is here tonight to request major site plan approval to allow for the construction of a 5-story building with 51 dwelling units. So this site, as I mentioned, is part of the property that contains the current Johnson Creamery office building. The particular portion of the property that is being discussed tonight is a parking lot that is on the north side of that building. You have 8th Street that runs along the north side. The Beeline Trail runs along the east side of this property. So this site received site plan approval from the Plan Commission last year for a building. As part of that petition, they were proposing to relocate an underground stormwater culvert that runs underneath the site. So you can see here on this exhibit, the location of that culvert. It's a 48-inch pipe that runs through here that's also within a 15-foot easement. It runs through kind of the northeast side of the property. So the petitioners were proposing to relocate that storm line, which would require moving it to the east side of the site and then basically ripping up all of 8th Street to move that pipe. However, there were a lot of difficulties that were encountered as it kind of got further into the design process, concerns regarding the stability of the smokestack that is adjacent to this. So the petitioners have had to redesign their site plan from what was previously proposed. So as I mentioned, this is the previous site plan, had the building in the location of their current culvert that was going to be relocated. However, that is not possible. So they have had to redesign the site to avoid any disturbance to the culvert or the easement. And so they've adjusted the design of the building to basically kind of run alongside the culvert and the easement with the site plan that you can see here. So that's required a different design of the building along 8th Street as well as along the Beeline Trail to not have any encroachments within that easement. So here is the overall site plan. 8th Street is on the north side of the site. You can see the building that's kind of in the center of the screen is the proposed new building. And then to the south of that, you have the existing Johnson Creamery building. So the petitioners would be proposing a new 5-story building. This would have all 5 floors being residential units, 2 units on the ground floor with some amenity space on the front along 8th Street. 18 parking spaces would be proposed underneath the building. There are 8 parking spaces that are just to the south of this, that are between this and the Johnson Creamery building that would also be remaining. So there would be 26 parking spaces for the 60 dwelling units and 74 bedrooms that are proposed. So as I mentioned, they are not allowed to have any portion of the building over the easement or the culvert. So they have designed the building with a very angular front along 8th Street, a outdoor plaza and kind of seating area, as well as an entrance to the building is along the Beeline Trail, with the 2 ground floor dwelling units just to the south of that, kind of on the left side of the screen. So the petitioner is proposing to utilize the sustainable development incentives again. This was a component to the previous petition that allows for them to have a 5th story on the building. So they are requesting to utilize those incentives, and that's been outlined in our staff report. And I'll kind of go over that a little bit later as well. So this is a rendering showing how the building would look from the Beeline Trail. As I mentioned, they've got a direct entrance into the building from the trail that would go to that plaza area that would also access the site. There's an entrance on the north side of the building to that entrance. The ground floor along 8th Street would have a workout area, an amenity center. There would also be some office space on the ground floor as well. And then, as I mentioned, the 2 dwelling units kind of on the south side of the site. So the underground parking, or I'm not underground, but under the building parking would be accessed via an alley on the south side of the site, as well as a drive cut on the alley on the west side of the site. So you can see that here from this rendering. This is looking at it from the alley, looking at the west side of the building. So there is no ground floor commercial space that is required for this building. They are allowed to have ground floor dwelling units. So there are no issues with the uses that are proposed within the building. So this is a view from the south side of the building, kind of looking northeast. Again, you can see the historic smokestack just to the right of the building, and then some of the parking on the underside of the proposed building. So with this, as with the previous petition, they were proposing some landscaping along the property to help kind of interact and buffer this a little bit with the Beeline Trail. They are proposing landscaping only on this property. Nothing is being proposed on the parks portion of the site along the Beeline. So they've got some heavy landscaping along here, which is some of the few improvements that are allowed within that easement. So we will be reviewing that a little bit closer with the grading plan, but so far no issues have been identified with meeting our landscaping requirements. Within the downtown, the landscaping code simply requires landscaping within the green spaces on the site. So they have basically filled in all of that green space with trees and shrubs, and have done a really great job with that, especially along the Beeline Trail. So this is a look at the first floor plan. As I mentioned, the 18 parking spaces that would be accessed with a drive cut to the south, as well as a drive cut to the west, about 1,000 square feet of fitness on the north side, and then the 2 ground floor dwelling units, as well as some support and office and lobby space along the ground floor as well. The upper floors are completely dwelling units. As I mentioned, there would be 60 dwelling units, 74 bedrooms. Vast majority of those units are all studios and 1 bedrooms, with a few 2 bedrooms and 4 3-bedroom units. So the petitioner has submitted elevations for all sides of the building, showing all of the siding material. It's a mix of a wood grain architectural cement board panel, some fiber cement panels, and then some metal panels as accent features. All of those are allowed building materials, both as primary and secondary materials. So those are all meeting UDO requirements. There are ground floor void to solid ratios that are required along both frontages. The petitioner is meeting that with a 60% void to solid along the Beeline, and then just over 80% along the north side of the building. So they have shown the required modulation throughout the building as well. There is one aspect of the building design that does not meet the current zoning code requirements, and that is in regards to the amount of the building that is at the build-to line. So within this overlay district, the UDO requires that 70% of the building be at the build-to line. So the build-to line at this area here is between 0 and 5 feet of the property line. And the petitioners, due to the underground culvert, are only able to have about 2% of the building at that line. You know, if you go back and look at the location of the culvert, that basically almost completely separates this property from the 8th Street frontage, it's almost impossible to have any building face along 8th Street or even within the build-to line. So the petitioners have requested a separate variance from that aspect, and that will be heard at this week's Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. So this site plan is obviously contingent upon that variance being granted, but that would be the only aspect of this that does not meet our architectural requirements. So as I mentioned earlier, they are proposing to utilize the sustainable development incentives that allow for an additional story on the building. As with the previous petition, they are meeting that through the light colored hardscaping that is being provided on the site, with the covered parking, the cooler vegetated roof, and the solar energy. So they will be setting aside portions of the roof for the solar panels. This has been shown on an exhibit within your packet and on the screen here as well. The areas outside of that will be finished with a very low reflective cover that meets the cool and vegetative roof requirements. They've also shown the hardscaping that will be installed, though again also has a very low reflectivity that is designed to meet our sustainable development incentives. So as with the previous petition, you know, we are recommending that the sustainable development incentives be approved with this, as they have met the 4 out of the 6 requirements or the options that are listed for those incentives. So that is another aspect of this petition. The second aspect of this petition is a reduction in parking. So the UDO has a new provision in the code that allows several options for petitioners within the downtown or even other areas of the city to be allowed a reduction in parking based on several different requirements or provisions in the zoning code. One of those is a proximity to a transit stop. So there is a transit stop just next to this at 7th and Morton. So that is within a quarter mile, and that allows for a 15% reduction from the 45 required spaces, which would bring the requirement down to 38. The other aspect of this allows for the petitioner to submit a parking study kind of analyzing demand and other options that are available to the petition. With this being a very bedroom count being one, mostly one in studios, there's a less parking need for that. But with the previous petition that we pointed out, immediately adjacent to this is a brand new parking garage within the trades district that was recently constructed that has a lot of spaces available for lease. And so it certainly is a much better use of resources to share parking within a garage than for each property by itself to necessarily have all of that parking. So the petitioners have worked or in conversations with the city to secure leases within the garage, kind of based on their demand. So given all the information in the parking demand study, as well as the bedroom count and the location of this property, the department does find that a further reduction of the 12 parking spaces is appropriate, and that the 26 proposed spaces for this site should be approved. So with that, we are recommending approval of this petition with the 2 conditions that are listed in staff's report, and then a third condition that we have added just to deal with verification of an east-west alley that runs through this site. We want to make sure that that has been properly vacated in the past. Most of the documentation so far appears to indicate that, but we want to have final verification, hopefully, of the actual approved resolution that solidified that. So we are recommending approval with the 2 conditions in staff's report and the third condition that is on the screen in regards to the alley. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Are there representatives of the petitioner who would like to add anything to the presentation?
Eric, who should I unmute here? Oh, you're on mute.
Ryan Cohen or Joseph Patrick are probably the 2 individuals that are going to be representing the petitioner.
Yeah, thank you. I think actually Michael Cordero was going to speak tonight, just real briefly, if that's okay.
Yep.
Yep. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Michael Cordero here. Wanted to thank everyone for your time this evening. We're excited to be back with this new proposal. We were excited also about our first go around, but unfortunately, due to some circumstances outside of our control, that one wasn't going to be able to work. But we are, just as excited about this this new design. Ratio, we think our architect and design team did another great job. And Eric has been very helpful in getting us here to this point. So yeah, we look forward and hope that this meets everybody's approval and hope to get started on this sometime late spring, early summer next year.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners, either for staff or for the petitioner? Commissioner St. John.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, both from staff and the petitioner. I just had 2 quick questions. And this is really for Eric or Mr. Grulich. On page 5, it talked about under parking that the petitioner had agreed to set aside 3 spaces within the garage for the ride share, and a condition of approval has been proposed to that effect. Am I misreading that, or?
No, that was an accidental carryover from the previous report when there were more parking spaces. So they are not setting aside spaces in the garage since the number of spaces on the site has gone down a lot more.
Okay.
They will have spaces in there, obviously, for all the people using the site, but they are not setting aside specific spaces for a car sharing program.
Okay, so no condition of approval for that. Okay, thanks.
Right.
And the only other question I had was just from the Environmental Commission, their memo, they mentioned that the amount of pervious surface needs to be calculated to determine the quantity of interior plants. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, in the downtown, the landscaping requirements are based on how much of a property has not been developed. So you basically show how much is going to be green space, And then your landscaping requirements are based on that. So it's an X amount of trees and shrubs per square footage or acreage of green space that is open and available. So they just needed that definitive number.
Okay, so sorry, what does that have to do with interior plants? I'm missing.
Well, it's not really interior plants, but it's plants for the site as a whole. So, you take a property, let's just say it's 1 acre in size, and you built a building on there that's a half acre.
I got
So
it.
that half acre is what they base on, the 1 tree for every whatever acreage and 3 shrubs for every acre.
Okay. So the interior is within the bounds of the property.
Not the building,
Yes.
yeah.
Gotcha, because I was a little perplexed why they'd be counting interior office plants. So thank you. Those are my 2 questions. Appreciate it.
All right, Commissioner Kinsey.
All right, thank you. I'd love to follow up on some of these. So I have a particular question related to parking. And I noticed on, let's see, one of the renderings that had numbers in a legend associated with it. Eric, it was one that you showed. There was an indication for something in 3. There's a space marked as 3. And yeah, if you want to bring that up, I just want to make sure I know what's going on this spot. It was one like, yeah, that there. Is 3 the parking area? I think it's parking, yeah, that's dedicated as number 3. Is that for residents of this building, or is that already parking that's available for Johnson Creamery residents?
So that is parking that is on the property as a whole. All of these spaces, those are surface spaces, however the owner wants to allocate those spaces, whether for residents or office uses or et cetera. We don't get into that specific allocation, but it is parking on the property as a whole. Office space, commercial space is not required any parking. It's only residential uses that have a requirement.
But this, and just to clarify, number 3 is already, it's parking right now, just so I have my orientation right?
Yes, that's part of the existing surface parking that is behind the building.
Okay, all right, okay, that's, okay, good. And then the other question I had is just to clarify the concerns about the culvert. And I know the original proposal was to move the culvert, and that became cost prohibitive and potentially dangerous. But is there a danger to building on a culvert, or is the problem that it can't be accessed and the city needs to be able to access it? What is the underlying problem? I just want to make sure I understand that.
Yeah, the main problem obviously is that we can't have a building over that culvert or easement because it, obviously it completely hinders anybody's ability to get to that in the case of emergency or repairs. So we can do, like parking areas or plazas or landscaping, but having an actual building over that easement is just not allowed by the easement language.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I think, to me, that makes it really clear that, the original design over a culvert is impossible. And that was why they were originally proposing to move.
And we've run into this situation in other places in downtown where you've got portions of the Jordan River that are in culverts that run underneath properties. So this does happen occasionally in the downtown.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I understand this is not just about, well, we didn't have enough money to do this, so now we have to do something else. This is clearly something that really must be adhered to. And
yeah, it's a much bigger problem than that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, good. And then I just want to confirm, while having this image up here might be helpful, can you just point out maybe on this, or maybe there's a better rendering of the east-west alley that you were indicating would need to be clarified if it was vacated?
Yes, so the alley runs through basically kind of like that.
Ooh, nice use of pointer. Okay, great. All right, so that's the,
Jillian,
okay.
can I make a comment about that? So the reason we're adding the condition is there where Eric has indicated appears to still be a platted alley. If you look it up on our, for example, on Elevate, it's still there. They use it. And we should have caught this last time as well. But basically, and Eric thinks that he has seen something that indicates that it's vacated, but on the Alta survey that they submitted, which is for the boundaries of the property, it is not vacated. So we want to be clear. We didn't want to hold them up. And Eric is pretty sure that they sussed this out the last time. But especially because they are under parking, what's required by code, that they need to get this alley vacated or show proof that it's been vacated previously in order to have this site plan approval. Because if they don't, you know, and then just said, oh, well, we'll just lose that parking. Well, now they're even further under,
Right.
and that's not what they presented here. So the condition will be that they have to, you know, either prove that it's already happened or go to council and get it vacated in order to be able to build this site.
Okay. Okay, that's great. And is that a condition then for this one?
That's the condition that Eric mentioned earlier that we're adding,
Yeah, okay.
adding tonight.
Okay, great. So that's not in our packet, but that we're adding.
Correct.
Okay. All right, good, good. Thanks for that clarification. And then I just had one last one that maybe the petitioner can comment on too, and it's about the materials. I thought I remembered from the last time we reviewed this, that there was some mention of limestone as a material, but I don't see limestone indicated on here, and perhaps I'm remembering, but I just want to clarify that none of that gray is limestone.
No, the gray that is shown here is a fiber cement paint.
Okay. And does the petitioner care to comment on, am I wrong about the limestone recollection from last time?
No, the previous petition did have some limestone bands on it. You know, yes, certainly they can comment on, you know, their choice to change that.
The previous design had some limestone featured around the retail, what was going to be the retail component of it, as just a, you know, sort of spruced up, a little more elegant entrance to the retail. And just when we redesigned it, we didn't really see any place that it made a lot of sense to use that material.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Commissioner Seabour.
Thanks. I think a couple questions that I have, and I'll maybe start off with on the topic of parking. I think Eric in the presentation, it had a nice aerial image of the site. And in the aerial, it caught my attention that the existing parking lot that this structure will go on was, I think, fully utilized by parked cars. And so I think just to, yeah, this one right here. And I guess just to verify that the commercial or office space doesn't require, the UDO does not require off-street parking. I guess just to confirm that, but then to hear from the developer or property owner, just what their plans are for that commercial space and making sure tenants are still using that wonderful space that's available there.
I can handle this. So the zoning does not require parking for the office or retail use. We have already worked with all of our tenants and let them know that, you know, parking is not going to be guaranteed. We did also secure parking for working hours from the church directly to the west of the Johnson's Creamery, the Bethel. We have, I believe, 13 spaces there on long-term lease. And then there is also, you know, a number of parking options, like daytime parking garage options, if any additional parking were needed. But we have already sort of worked that out with each of our existing tenants, and we let every new tenant know as well.
Okay, okay. And then one of the, I forget who, but somebody already asked a little bit about the car share space. That was a question I was going to ask as well. And I guess as I read the parking study that was associated with this to request to reduce the minimum parking, it, as a part of its conclusions, recommended that there be at least one car share space be provided, and that additional car share spaces may also be desirable. So I was just wanting to follow up on that, I think, key recommendation, if that study is being used to justify the reduction in minimum parking.
So I think we are still going to attempt to have one like a ride share space dedicated. Ultimately, when redesigning this, we did have more parking, but it was pushed towards the B-line, so it would have been, taking away from some of the landscape space. So ultimately, we ended up having to, as part of the design and trying to keep with the design standards that the city was asking us to. We ended up losing a little bit more space, but we have talked to the city about, again, leasing parking in the brand new parking garage that was just built in the Trades District garage. So we do know that those options are available to us as well. So that's why we didn't want to add too much or really ultimately put ourselves under the requirement of any additional ride sharing, because we do have so much additional parking option very close by. But I do believe that we still want to explore the option of having at least one ride share spot.
I guess, would you be, and I don't know if you're the person to ask, but willing to commit to that, just recognizing that was a very clear recommendation of the parking study that was included in our packet?
Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's somewhat out of our hands in terms of whether or not one of these ride sharing companies will even lease a spot in this location. I'm happy to agree to having these conversations, and however we can sort of I guess give proof to you guys that we've had conversations and either it's been denied, but if there is a company out there that is willing to rent one and partner us up with us on this location, we're happy to do so. I think we had some of the conversations very initially last time, and there was some interest, but none of the companies were like, yes, you just let us know when it's ready and we'll be there.
Okay. And maybe I'll chew on that a little bit more, and maybe others will have some thoughts as well. But another, just switching topics a little bit, and maybe this has come up in other meetings I've been in or just heard, but just to ask about the site, assuming everything's approved and moves forward, just to understand what the construction of it will be. I know it doesn't, just to better understand it, you're next to, I just drove like a very narrow 12-foot wide right of way, 8th Street, essentially dead ends at your property. So it's atypical to have to build a 5-story tall building next without really good street frontage that people can circle around. So just curious if the development team has really thought through and could explain, just so the public at least can understand what the construction impacts might be, how it might affect, things like farmers markets and just access to the site in the area in general.
Absolutely. I think my director of development, Joe, has his hand up. He might be trying to unmute, but I'll let him field this one.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to raise my hand on the previous question. I'm sorry, if I could back up just for one, I think I have a little more clarification on the question that Andrew had regarding the car sharing request in the report. So if you look back at the parking report, the intent was, and I think he probably should have clarified a little bit more, was that we request that a car sharing space be reserved in the public parking garage. So we had mentioned that to him, that we were going to be in contact with the city of Bloomington, especially the Trades District garage, to talk to them about availability and trying to reserve spaces. And we would recommend or request and see if they would be able to provide a car sharing dedicated space in that garage. That was what the recommendation in the report was, not necessarily for our garage. So it's a little confusing and probably not as clear as it should be, but that was his intent. So if you wanted to go back and clarify that one. And then if I could, I'm sorry, I was trying to type at the same time. So if you wouldn't mind repeating the question you had about access, I could probably help on that one as well.
Sure. The other question was really just thinking through construction and impacts, ability for like potential impacts to farmers markets, or just knowing the trucks and deliveries. Like, I just don't know how trucks and people will get in and out of this site, knowing it's basically a dead end road with a 12-foot wide alley on one side.
Yeah, no, and it's a good question. So we have been reviewing that with our pre-construction general contractor to talk a little bit about site logistics. And one of the benefits we do have is that space that I think was referenced earlier, which is an existing parking area behind the existing Johnson Creamery office building. So we would utilize that space as part of our staging area. So it gives us at least one area where you could temporarily just, cut off parking while we're staging, or if we have special deliveries coming in and out. Now, they would still have to come in and out of the alley. The other benefit is that we do have 8th Street, and we do have, somewhat circular, I guess, traffic, if you will, between 7th, 8th and the alley that runs north-south. So ideally, we would likely deliver most of the bigger, let's call it, for delivering steel or something like that, would probably happen on 8th Street, where the traffic is a little bit less. And obviously, we would just have to do temporary closures while the trucks are parked there, for instance. But with the way we talked about it, we would ideally, and I think we can safely say that we would not need to do any closures along the B line ever. We wouldn't have any. There's no utility connections over there. So this whole point of leaving that box culvert alone, really the only work that's happening to the east side of the building is mostly landscaping and sidewalks and things along those lines that can be done with smaller equipment. So we would not be needing to do any closures along the B line. We would have probably temporary closures along 8th Street just for deliveries and for utility connections. There are a few that would happen in 8th Street. And then a couple that would be along the alley as well. We would have some utility relocations up and down the alley. So those would all be temporary though. And I think we could certainly coordinate anything that happens along 8th Street to avoid farmers markets that might happen in the parking lot across the street, or certainly any special events that might be happening in the area at the time. So that it gives us one area where we can stage stuff and keep it on our property behind a fence and kind of out of the way of the public, and then other areas where we can temporarily, tie them off and then let them back into the public access. So.
Great, thank you for just thinking through it to that much detail and taking the time to describe it a little bit.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's important. We understand that.
Thank you. Any additional questions from commissioners? Commissioner Herrera.
Right, thank you. This is representing the voice of Park and Recreations and also the Board of Park Commissioners. I received an email and I was asked to mention this to the petitioner, and it's about the 2 potential sidewalk connections to the B-Line Trail. The confirmation if the developer would follow the standard encroachment and treatment process that the Park and Recreation Department has. And the second part, it's about the making sure if there is some type of landscaping visual screen between the parking lot and the B line. So this question is for the petition.
Yes, I mean, Eric, would you be able to bring up the landscaping plan? I think that would be helpful for a second if you could, or if somebody, or I could. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think, so looking at this drawing here to answer your question, we have 2 connections to the B line, and we would essentially take the sidewalk to the property line. So that white dashed line represents our property line. And then anything east or between that property line and the B line trail is technically owned by the city of Bloomington and managed by the Parks and Recreation, I guess, or the Parks Department. So we would certainly work with them to coordinate that connection within those few feet between the B line and our property line, and whether they would perform that work or whether they'd want us to, we would work with them to coordinate those connections. And we would obviously follow whatever requirements and ordinances there are as far as the flare angles and the slope to make sure that they're handicap accessible, certainly, and meet all of the standards within the city. So that would not be a problem. Regarding landscaping, again, what we've done here is we are showing essentially landscaping within our property. We obviously are not showing additional landscaping on the property that we don't own. So that would be, I guess, a discussion that we would have to have. There is existing landscaping in that area between the property line and the kind of curve of the B line. So there's existing grass and shrubs and trees in those areas right now. So, I mean, our intent was, since that's not really our property, was that they would remain. Certainly, if there's any need for us to, protect that during construction, we certainly would. Or if there was a need to refurbish that based on something that required it because of construction, we would certainly do that as well. And obviously, in coordination with the Parks Department. Does that essentially answer the question or kind of clarify that little zone? It's kind of a little no man's land between our property line and where the pavement is for the B line. But essentially that zone is it's not really our property to kind of just work with. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Additional questions from commissioners? Commissioner St. John.
Yeah, I just have one last quick question in that maybe it's something you can answer or not, or maybe it's really for Eric. I don't know, but that parking lot, I know when it really rains, that whole parking lot floods. Does this make this, I guess this would make it better? Maybe not better for people around it, but like, I know it floods significantly when we have these heavy rains. What happens here? Does it just go down the alleys or?
Well, so I think there's a stormwater inlet or a couple of them right there on 8th Street where this parking lot is. I can't speak to why there is so much pooling that happens there. I mean, it's obviously a low place on the property, and that's where the inlets are. It won't be pooling on this site anymore, certainly, because there'll be a building there. I think some of it is just related to how much drainage comes down this street and is not able to get into the existing culverts that are along Rogers Street. And 8th Street has a little bit of a slope there that is just not able to get into those culverts, and it just goes to this natural low area. Mm-hmm. I think those are conversations that the petitioner will have with the utilities department, as part of the grading permit process. It certainly won't be making it worse. I think that the fix to that is beyond what this property can do. I think that those are other fixes along Rogers Street and 8th Street to get water into the culvert that runs underneath there faster and better.
Yeah, I would think it would go away with the building there. So I'll just go somewhere else. So thank you. That was it.
All right, additional questions from commissioners? All right, seeing none, we will then move on to public comment on SP 27-21. If you'd like to make a comment, please click on the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand, and we will recognize you as best we can in the order that you've raised your hand, and you will have 5 minutes to make comment. Is there any public comment? I'm not seeing any raised hands. Jackie, you
I don't
see
see any. I
anything?
haven't received any chats.
Any comments on, are we doing a Facebook feed tonight? All right, it looks like there is no public comment. So we are then back to the commission for any final questions or comments or a motion. As a reminder, excellent. The staff recommendation is that we approve this with 3 conditions of approval.
I'm ready to move approval. I think this looks like a great development. I appreciate the attention to the environmental considerations here for this and all of the work that went into redoing this after the complications with Culvert arose. So I move approval of SP 2721 with the 3 conditions of approval noted by staff.
All
Second.
right. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any final comment before we call the roll? Okay, I'll just say, yeah, that I agree. I think this is a good project. I would offer just one pushback on one point, which is that I don't think it's a safe conclusion that just because there's a building there won't be any water. If you've been in the lobby of the Johnson Creamery recently, you know that a building and pooled water can exist in the same place. So if there's a way to improve the amount of inlet that's there along 8th Street, I think that would be wise during the construction process. So that's my only comment. Commissioner Kinsey, you have a comment?
Yeah, I do. I have one other comment about this. I appreciate the petitioner's reworking of this whole design. I understand the complications. I am a bit saddened to see some of the modifications. I thought the previous design, I'll just elevate the quality of the previous design, really had some really nice access features and a little more mimicry of the building and the existing creamery building and access to the beeline, but I understand the constraints on this space. The other thing I want to acknowledge is the use of the sustainability incentives. And I just want to make sure that we are acknowledging that more publicly and that becomes more of a commitment to our use. And I think the city staff's advising people of how to use those sustainability incentives is really important. So I just want to draw attention to that again, that is an important way to leverage other issues like height and other considerations. So this to me is a good use of the sustainability incentives. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you. Commissioner Cochran.
I will vote to approve, but I just want to, as someone who's worked on this, not on this particular project, but who has evaluated this building several times, I never thought of this parking lot as an infill lot the way it's being utilized. And so when you think of the different infill lots in our downtown, this is a perfect use for this lot, considering it's right next to the trades. It's right next to so many of the activities around the City Hall and the Showers building. And, it kind of took me by surprise for somebody who is in this world. But I do think it's just a great use of this lot, and it's better utilizing a really good lot in a great location. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Any other final comments? All right. So the motion is for approval. And Darla, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Kate,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
and Stebor.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Motion carries and the petition is approved. Our next petition is DP 29-21. Petitioner is Alacrity Investments, Sukhvinder Mehta. The property location is 2306 and 2310 West 3rd Street. And Eric, are you presenting this one as well?
I am actually.
Oh, we have Karina here to present. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Karina,
okay.
the floor is yours. Take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'll just share my screen real quick. Okay. So this is a request for a primary plat approval to change one lot into two lots. And the secondary plat approval to be delegated to planning staff. The site is located at 2306 and 2310 West 3rd Street. And it's zoned mixed-use corridor and currently contains an assisted living facility that was constructed in 2014, along with a parking area east of the facility structure and retention ponds south of the structure. Surrounding land uses include mixed-use corridor, residential multifamily, and single-family homes within the county's jurisdiction that are located north of the lot. And there are two sinkholes that require karst conservancy easements. One is located on the eastern portion of the lot, and the other is located just north of the lot. There is also an existing 5-foot wide sidewalk along the lot frontage that was installed by the city with a previous project along the 3rd Street corridor, which is designated as a general urban street in the transportation plan. And the petitioner is requesting to subdivide the lot into two lots so that the existing building and parking area on the east are on their own lot. And then the second vacant lot is created to the west. So both lots are to utilize a shared access driveway from the West 3rd Street. So staff reviewed the subdivision approval criteria, and the proposed finding is that the subdivision proposal does allow for adequate development area outside of the karst conservancy easements that are on the eastern portion of the lot. However, no new construction has been submitted for the western portion, and there is no floodplain on the site. Staff reviewed the general compliance criteria, and the proposed finding is that the petition does meet all the Unified Development Ordinance requirements related to design and configuration of lots in the MC zoning district. The petition was taken to the Development Review Committee, where there were some concerns regarding identifying the center line of the road and the dedicated right-of-way on West 3rd Street, including a pedestrian and utility easement in the access easement, verifying that the minimum 40% landscape area requirement is met on the lot that will contain the existing building areas, and also identifying the existing easements with language from the current code for their respective restrictions. So these concerns were shared with the petitioner, and changes were made to address the concerns. The petition does meet the general compliance criteria requirements. So right-of-way dedication along West 3rd Street is required and shown to exceed the minimum requirements of the transportation plan, which requires a 10-foot wide sidewalk along the West 3rd Street frontage. The petitioner has chosen to dedicate 50 feet in order for the entirety of the required sidewalk to be within the right-of-way. The petitioner will install or bond for the required right-of-way improvements with the secondary plat, and a condition of approval is included. The plat includes a utility, pedestrian, and access easement over the shared driveway. The plat also includes the required karst conservancy easements around 2 karst features, one protecting the karst feature on the eastern lot and one protecting the karst feature north of the lot. Each of the proposed lots can meet development standards such as a minimum lot size and maximum impervious surface coverage, which is 60% for the MC zoning district. So by subdividing the lot into 2 lots, the granting of this proposal would allow the western lot to be sold and promote development along the West 3rd Street corridor. There is no new construction proposed with this petition. And the department recommends adopting the proposed findings and approving DP-29-21 with the following conditions. 1, that approval of the secondary plat for the subdivision is delegated to staff. And 2, that with the approval of a secondary plat, the petitioner shall install or provide a financial performance guarantee for the required sidewalk improvement. Thanks. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Karina. Any questions from commissioners? Well, I guess before we get to that, is the petitioner here? Would the petitioner like to add any comments?
Who should we unmute? Let's see.
It should be Tom Nugent.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I really don't have anything to add. It's after the first presentation. This one's kind of boring. It's just kind of splitting it up into 2 pieces. The only thing I'd add is that there are already 2 addresses existing at that site because the western portion at one time had a house on it a long, long time ago, long since abandoned, long since torn down. So getting another address would not be a problem. It's already there. They're already in place. Other than that, I have nothing to add.
All right, thank you. Now, any questions from commissioners, either for staff or for the petitioner? Commissioner Kinsey.
I have one question. This probably goes to Karina staff. You went through the plat requirements or the plat review, and I wonder if you can speak to the verification of the minimum 40% landscape area, because I thought that was on existing property. Is that also, has that been verified as well? Is that part of development standards or is that something else?
Yeah, I thought it applied to the existing property. So I thought it applied to what it would be for the first lot, and then obviously the second lot doesn't have any buildings on it, so it meets the requirement.
Yeah, so in this case, it applies, sorry to jump in here, Karina. This case, she's correct, it does apply. We wouldn't let them create a lot where the building and stuff, where the development is already occurring on the east side, unless it met those development standards requirements. So she's verifying that creating this lot will not make that lot non-conforming in any way, because subdivision control can't do that.
Yeah, that's right. So the verification is that the minimum 40% is verified, essentially.
Yeah, it's verified on the east side, and that based on, the size and orientation of the lot on the west side, it's definitely developable based on minimum lot size and our other requirements in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Seabour.
Thanks. I guess just a quick question as I was looking at the plat in the presentation. I don't know if I realized it, but just wanting clarity on the sidewalk frontage. I think the width of the right-of-way is expanding essentially from the driveway to the western property line. But I guess between the driveway and the railroad tracks, realizing that maybe there is a separate property, it's just what I would think to be property frontage, just wanting to clarify what is property frontage in a situation like this?
Maybe Jackie has a better answer, but I think property frontage for this part is the sidewalk that goes directly along the 3rd Street corridor. Not the section of multi-use path that connects or goes over the railroad. Because there is a parcel there that is between the lot that we're talking about and
Right,
the
so,
railroad.
yeah, exactly. So in this case, frontage for the sidewalk that will be wider than the rest is roughly from the existing driveway to the western property line, because the city actually owns a parcel immediately to the east.
Okay.
You can see that's kind of this odd shape here.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any additional questions from commissioners? All right, seeing none, we will then go to public comment. If there are anyone who'd like to make public comment, please click the reactions button, click the raise hand button, and we will recognize you. I see one hand raised.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to check because I own property north of this. And
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you state your name for the record for the minutes?
sorry, Diana Reynolds.
Thank you.
Okay. And based on the drawing that I saw, I mean, that I understood that to be like an entire around 8 acres, but they're just asking to separate those two on the city side and the commercial, and everything north of what used to be Benham Lane, which is county, is not involved in this at all, right? Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, that's correct. The other property that they own that's on the county side that's north of the old Benham is not involved.
Okay, all right, yeah, well, I think they've been really good neighbors, so, you know, I'm all for them doing whatever they need to do for their business then.
All right, thank you. Are there any other public comments? I don't think there's anyone else in the meeting who could make public comments. So I think that's going to do it. We'll be back to the commission now for any final comments or questions or for a motion. And just as a reminder, the staff recommendation is that we adopt the proposed findings and approve DP 2921 with 2 conditions of approval. Commissioner Kate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Kate.
No, you're good. I was just going to move approval on adopting the proposed findings and approving DP 2921 with the staff conditions.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any final comments before we call the roll? All right, looks like we're ready. Darla, will you please call the roll on the motion to adopt the findings and approve DP 2921?
Okay, thank you. St. John,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Wessler,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Seabour,
Yes.
Herrera.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes and the petition is approved. Thank you to everyone. That is our final petition for tonight. Seems hard to believe, but I think we are ready to adjourn unless there are any final announcements.
We will be meeting tomorrow for PC lunch if you are available at 11:30. For those of you on the PC, anyone else is also welcome. Thanks.
All right, thanks everyone. If we don't see you tomorrow, we'll see you next month.
Thanks.
you.